Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Solidarity Warriors After We March, We Organize meeting. While we are giving folks a minute to join, go ahead and put your name and where you're calling from and why you're here in the chat. You can scan the QR codes on your screen to join the Activism Alliance Slack, where there are a whole bunch of like-minded activist groups coordinating and sharing information, and for group chat and action planning between meetings. This is where we planned the hands-off protest in Denver and where we are planning the future No Kings protest. You can visit our website, solidaritywarriors.org, where you can find more information, become a member, and check out our store that benefits our nonprofit. All right, we've got Georgia, Lakewood, Colorado, New Mexico, Hot Springs, Montana. We've got people from all over tonight. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome each and every one of you to the Solidarity Warriors Indivisible After We March, We Organize meeting. Thank you for being here and spending your time with us tonight. My name's Tiffany. I'm the ringleader of Solidarity Warriors. We are an action-oriented national nonprofit group that's part of the Indivisible Network. We formed right after the November election to resist the new administration. We've grown from 30 concerned citizens to over 250 activists across the country today. We've been working with groups like Colorado 5051 to organize massive protests at the Capitol in Denver. We're going to continue organizing protests in Denver and also providing information, education, and resources for all of our national members. If this is your first time here, we would love to welcome you. We meet on Zoom at the same time every Wednesday. You can sign up for our next meeting through the link in the chat. Let me go over our meeting ground rules in a second, but first I'm going to put links in the chat to the Activism Alliance Slack and our website. Our meeting ground rules are: be respectful to your fellow activists. Everyone is welcome here. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. To raise your hand, go to the bottom of your Zoom window. You'll see a raise hand button, or you might have to click on reactions at the bottom and you'll find the raise hand button there. Please mute your microphone when you are not speaking and turn on your video if you feel comfortable doing that. Let's see, what else? Feel free to use the chat for any questions or comments. Please save questions until the end of the current speaker. When we open the discussion for Q&A, please keep your questions and comments to 2 minutes or less to give others a chance to speak. Oh, one other thing, if you'd like to post questions in the comments during a speaker, just put the word question in all capitals before your question so that we can flag it and we can ask the speaker once you're done. Lastly, we are a nonviolent group. We do not advocate violence and we do not tolerate talk of violence in this meeting. I'm going to put some links in the chat tonight. I will also send all of those links out in the follow-up email tomorrow. Keep an eye out for an email from Solidarity Warriors. And I want to share something with you. Solidarity Warriors is a nonprofit. We organize protests, but we also put pressure on politicians, protect vulnerable communities, and serve the community in general. Our main fundraising project is our resistance stickers. These were designed by our members, and they carry messages of defiance and resistance. We want to see them spread all across the country. There are a couple of new stickers that are very amusing, using satire as a form of civil resistance. And those are available through the link in the chat. Donations are definitely not required, but they help us cover the costs of the stickers and the postage. This project also allows us to fundraise for protests. And monthly donations are great because they help us cover monthly expenses like Zoom and plan for future actions. Just a heads up, we are posting our meetings on YouTube. It's a free way to make our meetings available to those who aren't able to attend. And YouTube has started feeding our content to people who are looking for similar videos. And we want to reach as many people as possible with the messages that you all find valuable enough to keep coming back for. Please feel free to turn your camera off and change your name if you want to. You can change your name by clicking on the three dots in the top right corner of the box that shows your camera or your name and going to rename. You can also find the three dots by clicking on participants at the bottom and locating your name. Here is a link to our YouTube channel where you can watch past meetings. And the Solidarity Warriors Activist Barbecue in Denver is this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's going to be at Inspiration Point Park in Denver near 49th and Sheridan. We'll provide meat, veggie burgers, and soda. If you want to bring a side or dessert, please feel free to do so, but do not feel obligated. You can RSVP to the barbecue using the link in the chat. The next National Mass Day of Protest and Action will be No King's Day on June 14th. June 14th, which is Flag Day. On that day, Trump wants tanks in the streets and a made for TV display of dominance for his birthday. A spectacle meant to look like strength. But real power isn't staged in Washington, it rises up everywhere else. We'll be organizing a protest with Colorado 5051 in Lincoln Memorial Park. Please note it will not be on the steps of the Capitol. It will be in the park that is right across the street from the Capitol, just on the other side of Lincoln. We'll have more details coming soon. If you're not in the Denver area, you can sign up for an event near you or organize your own by going to nokings.org. And then there's also the link here to sign up for the Denver No Kings event. Last week, we talked a little bit about goals, and we'd love for you to fill out the survey I'm going to put in the chat. This is about what you think the goals of the overall movement should be and what role you'd like to see Solidarity Warriors play. The reason we're doing this is that we know that there are a lot of varying goals across the progressive movement, and sometimes it's hard to come to consensus. So we want to know what you guys think, what you all think. And we will follow up once we have some survey results. Tonight, our guest speaker is Gary Krane, who is going to talk to us about nonviolent direct action and how a mass nationwide nonviolent resistance is actually quite feasible right now. Gary has over 4 decades of experience in organizing, fundraising, documentary production, and social venture startups with numerous national awards. For the past 4 years, he has also become a nonviolent resistance scientist and inventor, developing the first proven, simple, scalable, repurposed tech able to do double the quadruple recruitment rates for high bar task volunteers and for resistors for nonviolent resistance strategy-based campaigns. Gary also has a PhD in psychology from Harvard and UC Berkeley. There's a need for a national civic uprising capable of not merely stopping the current fascist dictatorship in its tracks, but in totally altering our suicidal and ecocidal trajectory toward a new beginning that can stop and reverse the rapid destruction of the planet and our so-called democracy. He offered to speak with us tonight to explain how such a national civic uprising might actually be feasible from a psychological perspective. Gary's email and signal number are now in the chat. And Gary, I will let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Yeah, if you scroll to the very top, you can see my email and my signal number. And I guess what I'd like to first start out is maybe, and tell me if I talk too long, Tiffany. Like, I hope I don't go more than about 2 or 3 minutes, just telling you my own kind of personal story to get a sense of who I am and what motivates me. And then I will go into I guess, the basis for what my mission in life now is, which is to try to see if we can finally get off the ground a national civic uprising that would involve 10 to 12 million people. The number Chenoweth has been recommending that would give us a 70 to 80% chance of success. So about me, um, I guess one phrase that kind of summarizes me, which has just become popular very recently, is the phrase moral ambition. Um, there's a new book out called Moral Ambition, and the author's Rutger Bregman, who's on The Daily Show recently. And it sort of combines the idealism of your typical activist with the ambition, uh, sort of get shit done, build something new, of the entrepreneur. And this kind of goes all the way back from my being kind of a working class Jew and seeing my mother exploited, being the first woman to get a law degree and not getting a job because she was a woman. And then later, when they were hiring women, they wouldn't hire her because she was a Jew. Seeing my father being exploited by a rich Jew, and so developing a real anger about injustice from an early age. At the same time, living in an area where in Minneapolis everybody had a lawn, and so the way you could make money as a kid was cutting lawns. And I soon realized that actually I could hire kids work for me to cut even more lawns. So I was kind of an entrepreneur from even when I was 12 years old. um, and to kind of cut way ahead, I my first major entrepreneur idealistic stuff was I started an alternative school in Berkeley in the 60s. Half my kids were black. Most of them were in the Black Panthers. Um, and then I went on to become an investigative filmmaker for many, many years, making a lot of the major anti-nuke films of the 80s. I was pretty obsessed with the possibility of accidental nuclear war. Um, and I could go on, but just lots of things like that sort of made up my life. And then I started becoming more of a history buff. Actually, I should say during this time in my 20s, I some of my most wonderful experiences in life were in the wilderness, in places like Yosemite, or doing peak fall color canoe trips up in Maine, things like that. So I also developed a very deep love for nature. And and then I guess at some point I started getting very interested in history. And very quickly I discovered that every major advance in America really required a massive nonviolent resistance movement, whether it's abolishing child labor, or women getting the right to vote, or the civil rights movement, or the labor movement and the New Deal, and the right to the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour day, Social Security, the whole safety net. All these things required massive nonviolent resistance. The Civil Rights Act, I already said that. The anti-Vietnam War movement, the gay rights movement, the ACT UP, the disability rights movement, everything that's ever made this country advance in any significant way has always required a massive nonviolent resistance movement. So I became very interested in Gandhi and so forth. And I became much of a history buff. I even co-wrote a piece with Howard Zinn. Um, and then I think it was around 2018 or so, I discovered Erica Chenoweth's work, and the notion of crowd acting, because I was always puzzled, well, how are we going to be able to get this happening again to save the planet, and now to save democracy, and now to basically start make taxing the rich. And so I'm going to have Tiffany play just a 3-minute animation, which describes this first concept I came across called crowd acting, and which started to put together the pieces of the puzzle, which has led me to where I am today. So it starts out kind of rinky dinky, but I think it's basically will communicate what the concept of crowd acting is. Make sure you got your volume up, everybody.
This is Adam. Like most of us, he gets bombarded with our world's great problems. He reads about global warming in the morning paper. sees a billboard showing starving children in Africa on his way to work, and at dinner, his friend tells him about the awful labor conditions under which his new t-shirt was made. A day like this makes him feel quite powerless. The solutions offered to him, like switching to renewable energy, donating to charity, and boycotting certain brands, seem like nice ideas. But honestly, he feels that his individual actions wouldn't really make a difference. Too often, his actions feel like a drop in the ocean. Like Adam, many of us are aware that we live in a time of unprecedented global challenges. But we sometimes forget that this is also a time of unprecedented possibilities. With 3 billion people connected to each other through the internet, we have the ability to act collectively as a species for the first time in history. Imagine Adam's actions are coordinated with 100,000, a million, or even a billion people. Then there would no longer be a drop in the ocean. Crowd acting makes exactly this possible. Basically, it works like crowdfunding, but instead of committing to a financial contribution, you commit to an action. And you only have to fulfill your individual commitment when the collective target is met. If 100,000 people take action, then we all do it. If not, no one does. No cure, no action. Let's look at an example. We all know that we should switch to renewable energy, but most of us don't. We're too busy. Switching seems like a hassle, and we don't really know where to switch to. Now imagine a crowd acting campaign knocked on your door and said, here's the deal. Click here to commit to switching to renewable energy if 99,999 others do so as well. 100,000 people switching collectively leads to a win-win-win situation. You get a better price, and switching is made easy. Renewable energy companies can invest in a sustainable future with 100,000 new clients, and the planet gets a breather. But it does not stop with the environment. You can use crowd acting to realize any form of social change that requires collective action. You can initiate a mass boycott on Company X that produces t-shirts made with child labor, agree on a nationwide internet-free day as a reminder for people to enjoy quality time with their loved ones, or organize coordinated protest with millions around the world to call a halt to ever-rising bankers' bonuses. The tools and technology are there. We no longer have to scale social change step by step. Crowd acting allows us to take one giant leap at a time. Will you leap with us? Start your own campaign or join an existing one at collaction.org. Find out more on crowdacting.org and like us on Facebook.
Now those two sites are no longer, well, actually CollAction is active. The crowd acting is now a very expensive domain for sale, which I should have bought. Anyway, so after this kind of realization, I've always been puzzled. I should say that, you know, in the so-called home of the brave, I find it so odd that so few people are actually willing to do nonviolent direct action in America, which is at most a night in jail, a $50 or $100 bail, which you'll get back. The campaigns always have lots of lawyers that cover your ass, and yet, you know, throughout the 2018s, 2019s, 2020, when all these pipeline battles are going on and Standing Rock and everybody, they would never get very many people. Standing Rock got a few, up to 10,000 people, but they never really got the numbers they needed long enough to really win. And it always puzzled me, you know, why are people so cowardly that they won't even spend a night in jail to save the planet? And so I decided to start interviewing people. And by the way, you know, I'm puzzled by this because for me, it's always been the proudest moment of my life to do nonviolent direct action, spend a night in jail, usually with someone who has more integrity than most of my friends. And yet I would always find it difficult. I always find most people finding it difficult to do for some reason. And so I started interviewing people, ended up being about 200 people. And I discovered that the crowd acting thing, as compelling as most of you probably find it to be, it still wasn't enough. And I would come up with, I'd first find out what people are most angry about. And I was doing this mostly in New York, but it was probably safe to say this was true most throughout America. Most people were very angry about the healthcare system. So I would give them a hypothetical scenario where the organizers of this hypothetical campaign discovered that if they could shut down the Congress for 2 weeks, and it would take about 10,000 people every day willing to get arrested, which is about 100,000 people over 2 weeks, 10 working days. But the demand being that Congress pass Medicare for all, there'd be a realistic chance of it passing. And I'd ask people, so would you be willing to do this? And I would discover that the crowd acting was, I said, would you be willing to do it if 99,999 other people were willing to do it as well? And that would, if people were angry at Medicare and not having a Medicare for all in our healthcare system, and I mentioned the collective action idea, that crowd acting idea, that would take them from a 3 to 4 on a 10-point scale of willing to get arrested. It would maybe take them up to 5 or 6, but it wouldn't take them up to a 9 or 10. So to make a long story short, I discovered there were several other things that people needed. And I should have given you this link. Let's see if I can put them up real quick. Well, I can actually just say them for now. I'll put them up later. I discovered that even extroverts wouldn't do it unless they had a friend to go with them. This was certainly true of introverts. I'm not going to go to Washington or St. Louis or wherever the action is, or my own home city, unless I have even if there's going to be thousands of other people, I need a friend to go with me. That's number one. Number two is I need to know that this is not going to really affect my professional license, either getting one or endangering my losing one. Number three, I need to know that something about whether your lawyering team is sufficient and something about the nature of the police behavior. How risky is it likely to be that I might incur some serious injury? And number four is I'm a working class person. I'm in New York, you want me to go to Washington, D.C., or I'm in Aurora and you want me to go to Denver or wherever, it's going to cost, $50, $100 in train, and then there's the bail, and it's just too much. But if you could be some financial help, then I'll do it. And then the last one was that I need to know that this probably going to be, because I'm young and I'm single, I need to know there's going to be a bunch of parties afterwards. And I discovered that first of all these things can be automated, so that once the campaign is notified that these are my needs, to be willing to say, yes, I'm willing to join your nonviolent direct action, these can be rather rapidly, quickly met. Now I started going around to all of the pipeline struggles that were happening then, starting around 2020, 2021, when I started putting together this pitch video, which I'm about to show you. And I couldn't find anybody willing to do it. And to this day, I've never been able to find out why nobody would let me beta test my invention. My invention being this, what I call ladder of engagement, that can go into any campaign website, that when you click on take action, it basically starts out by saying, are you willing to take action or are you not ready yet? Well, 5% really gung-ho people who will do everything just because it's the right thing to do will say, yes, I'm ready. But the other 95% will say not ready yet. So as you'll see in this video, what comes up next is basically, well, what do you need to be ready? And then there are these different options that I just mentioned that the user clicks off, and then the next page that comes up says, okay, well, if we can meet all these things, can we count on you to say yes? So the user basically is committing twice to saying yes. I'll tell you how that worked out after I show you basically again how this worked. And even though I couldn't find any campaigns in America to beta test it, the good news result that happened afterwards. So you want to start that video, Tiffany?
Yeah.
And
Let me
by the way,
share it.
before it starts, just one thing. The example we give is a liquid natural gas terminal because I was coming out pretty much very focused on the climate justice movement. But you can apply this to a national civic uprising where the demand is we start taxing the rich. We use that money to save the planet, Medicare for all, housing affordable, and so forth. So the same thing applies. So even though I've used this one example from the climate justice movement, please think about how this can apply to the movement we need today to save democracy and to save the planet.
All right, let me share it.
And we're gonna start 1:20 in. Just it goes about 9 more minutes.
In or near Tacoma, Washington, and is interested in stopping construction of a liquid natural gas plant near Tacoma. So when the user clicks on the campaign's website Take Action tab, they will be directed to this page where they can see the campaign organizer's detailed description of their campaign. And at the top of this page, they will see our first proven motivator, namely 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 videos of resistors who've been arrested or are about to risk arrest, or in the case of a strike action, have gone on a strike. They would be giving short, inspiring, motivating statements about why they are joining the fight, voicing how this direct action or strike or other form of nonviolent civil resistance was in fact the best, proudest moment, liberating day of their life, and how, for example, considering what is at stake, the very survival of our planet, of Mother Nature, of democracy, or their own self-respect and dignity, whether they succeed or not, a night or two in jail was the very least they could do. The videos can also speak, of course, to all the support they get from others in the campaign. So they watch these motivating videos, and while doing so, they can also find out about the goal of the particular campaign, its strategy, the fact that they are going to be kept informed. They will see the backing organizations that are already endorsing the campaign. They'll see that there's an FAQ where they can find out more. Now, we know that probably 5 to 10% of your campaign site visitors are going to be so gung-ho they're going to be signing up right away. And when they do, they'll be given an option for our privacy policy to look at that. They'll also be given the option right away, if they don't already have a Proton Mail account, to get that because Proton Mail is based in Switzerland and their whole business plan is not to cooperate with subpoenas from the U.S. Justice Department or the CIA or the NSA. The other important thing is that we'll be assuring people that none of their private user data will be kept on our servers to prevent this from being hacked. So when the user signs up, the other interesting function that we will have in our second iteration to help the campaign spread much faster is one that enables the user to invite all their Facebook friends to join your campaign with their own invite message. And if even one agrees, the user gets a message back to them that creates sort of a social accountability pressure for both to keep their commitment. So we think this will really help the campaign spread itself rapidly, as well as reduce the problem of flake out and forgetting. Now, for the 90 to 95% that are not so gung-ho and ready to click on ready to join, these are the people who are obviously afraid, leery, not sufficiently excited. So they are logically going to click on not ready. And this is where our second major proven motivator comes in. It's a quasi-behavioral economics tactic where we are basically creating a choice architecture to make it easier for people to do the right thing, to be willing to risk arrest, join a strike, or take on any courageous role. We do this by basically providing a list of the most common psychological and logistical support conditions that people would need to be willing to commit to a courageous action. Now, based on our research, the most important need and support condition would be the need to be more confident of success of the action. In other words, that if they did join, there would be, say, at least a 50% chance of winning, or for the more risk-averse types, a 75% chance of winning. Also, it could be simple things like, I need to know that the campaign is going to provide the bail money I need, or the transportation I need. Or because I'm an extreme introvert, I need to be invited by a friend. I don't want to be the only person on the bus or in the action and I don't know anybody else there. Or it might be I need to know more about the track record of the leaders so I can trust they know what they're doing. Now, if they choose the I need to be more confident of success option, the support condition we know most people will choose based on our extensive research and user testing, this leads to our crowd acting functionality, our third powerful and proven motivator, which you already know from watching the 3-minute animation that preceded this video in the PowerPoint slide. This crowd acting motivator is why we are sometimes called Kickstarter and More meets movement organizing. So the user can basically move the slider bar over to the chance of success level where they feel comfortable to be willing to commit, to risk committing to an action. And as they move the slider, they see the percentages of success increasing because the organizers who've researched previous struggles have calculated that if they can get 84,000 people willing to risk arrest to shut down this plant, or basically 7,000 people a week for 12 weeks, that's most frequently the point when the investors start pulling out, and therefore we win. So the question marks basically explain how these figures are derived based on similar successes and failures. For the demo, they are just guesstimates, and the campaign organizers themselves would be responsible for the research to come up with these guesstimates. Now, regarding the 14,000 figure, people will be strongly encouraged to choose that lower figure because that's what we call the critical mass figure. And that's explained again by the question mark. By critical mass, we mean that if the campaign can get just this number of people committing in a relatively short time, especially given the power of crowd acting and our other courage unleashing supports, that's going to catalyze lots of social and major mainstream media attention, as we saw in the Dakota Access Pipeline struggle, or more recently with the Walls of Moms. And then it can start really growing very rapidly just on its own. Now, in case the user is still not ready to commit, our ladder of engagement deploys our fourth proven motivator, which we call widened role choice, where we give them lots of other roles specified by the campaign organizers from which they could choose, generally around 18 different roles, of course, depending on the type of action, including the all-important neighborhood team captain, and where they can also let the campaign know their first and second priority choices of roles. There can also be an option, if the campaign wishes, for users to suggest something that isn't on the list to tap the creativity of the larger collective. So the campaign now knows their first and second choices of need supports or conditions the user needs to be hopefully committed, and choices of roles, which if provided, they'll be ready to sign up to commit. And once they do sign up, we still will ask them if they can help in different ways, like donating money so we can provide childcare, which is very important, or a donation to enable the campaign to provide a huge party for the resistors. And we can, of course, use this as an opportunity also to crowdsource creative other forms of reward ideas from the larger collective that the campaign hasn't even thought of. So that's what this space is for. And then they can update, get our big thank you, and then a final checkout list. And if the campaign is a nonviolent direct action where transportation might be needed to a pipeline or a coal or gas terminal, they can indicate whether they need transportation or they can provide it. They will then finish the sign-up process by informing the campaign organizers if they have civil disobedience training, and also provide an opportunity to enlist our fifth and final motivator by inviting them, if they wish, to be connected with others near them with shared interests or hobbies, like camping, dancing, design, ecology, or whatever it is, so that we could then let them know that on the final thank you note that they get, that we're going to connect them with other people in their areas, in their neighborhoods, that have similar interests that they have. This can then start kind of a peer bonding process that the organizers can build upon in the neighborhood in person or Zoom meetings, using rooms, for example, and could also be a strong motivator to increase the likelihood that the volunteer will show up in the first place to the first neighborhood or citywide meeting, if for no other reason than to meet people with similar passions or hobbies. Think, for example, Meetup meets Civil Resistance Mobilizing. So thank you very much for watching this, and I hope that if you have any questions or any criticism, we cherish criticism. If you can think of any reasons this could fail, let us know. Otherwise, we hope you'll help support us so that we can get this beta tested as soon as possible. so we can get a proof of concept and find what else we need to perfect this. Thank you very much for your time, and we hope to hear from you.
Thanks. So anyway, I spent probably a year knocking on the doors of lots of different groups. I even went to Stop Line 3 and got arrested myself and had long talks with Winona LaDuke and Tara Houska, the two leading Native American leaders of that campaign. That's basically an extension of the XL pipeline, of those of you who have been in the pipeline resistance movement. And nobody wanted to test this, and no one really could give me a good reason. Most people would never even get back to me. It was just a big mystery. So finally, my friend Roger Hallam, who hopefully some of you know, was really the main founder of the whole Extinction Rebellion movement, along with Gail Broadbank and Claire Farrell. And then he went on to start Just Stop Oil, because Extinction Rebellion, after shutting down the London financial district for a week and forcing the British Parliament to be the first national parliament to declare climate collapse as a national emergency, it just grew to almost 1 million members almost within 6 months, 67 countries. But it grew so fast, so big, it was unable to really continue to take radical action. So he left Extinction Rebellion to start Just Stop Oil. And he finally took pity on me, and he said, my friends over in Germany, the biggest Keep It in the Ground campaign there, they're very interested in what you're doing. They're willing to invite you to beta test it. So in 2020, late in 2022, I went over to Berlin, and we beta tested it there, and it immediately doubled their rates of recruiting resistors. And that was without the conditional commitment. That was with the other conditions, which, by the way, I just put in a link to the 5 support needs that we're talking about here, including conditional commitment. So if you want to see a list of those needs, and to make it clear, when I interviewed people, not everybody, not even most people required all of these needs. They just required maybe a couple of them. Like they wanted to know a friend would go with them, and they wanted to know that the police were going to be pretty tame. Actually, in Washington, D.C., by the way, those of you who haven't gotten arrested in Washington, D.C., it's probably the safest place in the freaking world to get arrested to do nonviolent resistance. The police are just really, really sweet. They hate Trump, because of January 6th, so they're going to be very sympathetic. And the country itself, even if you're black, I mean, look at if you were doing nonviolent resistance in most countries in South America, Africa, you'd be tortured. You might even be killed. If you're a woman, you'd be raped. This in Western Europe are the safest, easiest places to do nonviolent resistance, and yet, unfortunately, people need these supports. But the good news is these supports are very easy to provide. They can be automated. So my basically conclusion here is that it is now finally feasible to have a massive nonviolent civic uprising that would have 10 to 12 million people, the number that Chenoweth's research suggests we need for it to be successful, that could go on for a week or two, demanding Congress start taxing the rich. I think that would be the one thing that you could get a huge coalition of right and left to unite around. And then underneath that, educate people about where that money could go, not only to what their immediate kitchen table needs are, lower cost of housing and healthcare, but to save the planet and save democracy. And so that's why those of you that like to join me and others, I hope we can find to start putting the pieces of the puzzle together for creating this national civic uprising. Now's the time. There's never been a greater possibility for this, not only because of this technology that I've talked about, but because there's never been a greater consensus around the need to tax the rich on both the right and the left, and among small business, among labor, among unorganized labor, and all those who want to save the planet, all those who want to have live in a country where healthcare is a right. So I think now's the time now. And in fact, if we don't do it now, it's going to be too late very soon. So I'm ready for any questions. And by the way, I cherish criticism. One other thing, I should have played this video as well, but maybe next time. One of my anti-nuke films had a 3-minute excerpt uh, telling the story of the Women's Strike for Peace, which started with 6 very ordinary housewives um, and mothers who were getting really pissed off, angry, very afraid of the fact that strontium-90 was showing up in babies' teeth because of above-ground nuclear testing. And within 70 days, these 60 women in 1961, without the internet, without Xerox machines, having to use mimeograph machines, if those of you old enough remember what those were, and phone trees, were able to get 100 to 200,000 women shutting down downtown New York, downtown Chicago, and it was growing rapidly so fast that the Kennedy administration became so upset and afraid that this would get totally out of hand that they declared unilaterally, we're going to stop nuclear testing. And we invite the other 3 nuclear powers, Russia, UK, and France, to do the same. And they quickly did. And this was so, if that could happen with 6 ordinary housewife mothers, I think we don't have to have famous professional organizers to make a national civic uprising happen. We just need people that really are devoted.
Greg, are you still hiring activists?
Oh, well, yes. I'm not a rich guy, but I have a little bit of money, and I've been a fundraiser most of my life because I was an investigative filmmaker many years, which is mostly at least back in those days, it was having to raise money. So I'm pretty confident that I can raise what I'm lacking, and I do have. If you'll email me, I'll send you a list of about 3 or 4 positions, all part-time, that I'm looking for. I haven't really crafted what the National Civic Uprising would be. These are positions for 2 earlier projects that I'm still interested in getting off the ground, but at some point I just want to hand off because I think obviously the National Civic Uprising, if I start to find 1 or 2 or 3 partners, that's going to take all my time.
All right, so let's do some questions. You can also raise your hand and talk about one thing that you learned tonight and how you plan to use it. Greg, go ahead.
Need to unmute first. I appreciate a lot of what you had to say, but I've missed a lot of it since you referred to me and most of the other people on this call as people who've not spent time in jail, therefore were cowards. That really pisses me off.
Oh, no, I wasn't referring to the people in
Yes, you
this
did.
group at all. Oh, I did.
People who've not spent time in jail and protested like you. Why is there so many cowards?
Well, let me correct that. I wasn't referring to people on this call. I was referring to Americans in general.
Exactly.
Yeah, but not people on this call.
Pissed me off. They're not cowards just because they're not like you, Gary.
Yeah, well, that definitely was not my intention at all, and I don't feel that way at all.
Thank you for the feedback, Greg. That is certainly duly noted. We don't want to imply that anybody here is a coward.
Well, and maybe he doesn't mean it, but that's what he said.
I think perhaps Gary may have misspoke, but
Okay.
I think he clarified it, and I'm glad that you brought it up, Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Greg.
I've got a couple of questions that came up in the chat, and this one may not be specifically for Gary, but one of the questions, and I think it applies outside of Colorado as well, so I'm going to use that as an example. Why are there so many events in and around Colorado instead of concentrating on one big event in the capital in Denver? The question said, I think to show the 11 million people on the street, we need everyone in Denver or in the same place.
I think that was more a question for us. So what I was saying is that Indivisible also wants to show that there are so many cities. Somebody else mentioned this, that we want to see that even in a small town here, they're going to get 200 people out to protest. And with the April 5th rally, where we had 10,000 people in Denver, there were still 30 other protests scheduled across Colorado that happened, at least that many. So I think it's important to give people a chance to protest somewhere closer to home if they're not able to make it to Denver, or if that's a little too far from them.
To follow up on that and to connect it to what Gary was saying, I think a lot of that has to come down to what is practical for somebody to go and do. So if you are a working person and you can't get time off of work to drive all the way to Denver, but there's a protest in your city, it gives you someplace to go. And it gives you a way to get out, to become involved in a way that is convenient. And the other part of this is these are all volunteer people. And it's not always easy to get people from distances away if they need money. And people who are volunteering in your area want to be able to participate. Having something all over the state makes it easier to get more people to participate. Justin, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Gary. I actually found your talk and your presentation to be one of the most inspiring that I've seen. And
thanks.
yeah, absolutely. And the reason for that, and some of the frustration I've had in some of the groups that I've tried to participate in or join, is there isn't really like much effort or attention put towards like professional efficacy, I guess. Like there's a lot of a mixing up of action and energy for impact. Like we got X number of people to protest or something, and maybe like that's enough. And I don't really feel like there's a lot of clear objectives or like measurable results that people are trying to get. And when I'm in a professional setting, that's one of the more basic tenets of project management. Is like we're trying to accomplish X thing by X time, and this is how we're going to measure whether we're successful so that we know that the actions we're taking actually have any impact at all. And so I've tried to bring this up in a lot of the groups that I've been in, and it's not always, it doesn't go very well for different reasons, because I feel like, I mean, maybe related to like the coward comment or something, it's just like, I think there is an element of frustration of like, it feels like we need to do something. It feels like it's obvious that we should do something. And then even when people like show up and are trying to do something, it's like, well, how do we know that that's the something we should be doing? And so the reason that I find what you were presenting to be very inspiring is that I feel like you're engaging at a strategic level with like the psychology behind organizing and like how to get people motivated to go from like I'm kind of worried about something to I'm actually taking action and I feel empowered is like a huge component of the problem. And so like figuring out, I work as a game designer actually, so there's a lot of overlap in the principles that I think you're talking about here and sharing, of like how to make things obvious to like a game tutorial, for example. Like you want to like have people learn what to do at each step without feeling like they're bouncing off of it because it's too frictious for them. So making like the next thing to do obvious at each step is what's important. And specifically, the thing that I've been thinking about as well, I've been writing a lot of organizing documents, but I haven't really been sharing them with anyone because I don't know what to do with them because I'm new to all this, is basically like, how do I connect the actions that individuals can take to a very high level objective? And so the last thing I'll say is, like, I see a lot of groups talking about, we want to save democracy, et cetera. And that's like a very, like, I share that goal and that core value, but also how, like, what exactly are we going to do? And so I like your language of national civic uprising, and like taxing the rich, etc. But what I don't see are very specific goals in a lot of cases where we say, what is our goal? Our goal is to make the administration step down, right? That's a clear goal. And also because not everybody might have that opinion yet, like that's what we need to be doing. But I'm sort of progressing forward on the timeline as if they're doing all of these kind of fascistic actions now that are like clearly unconstitutional, and they're showing disregard for the courts and the process, and they're getting rid of due process. They're going to keep going down that pathway, and it's going to get worse and worse and more antagonistic, which is sort of what I think you're getting at when you're saying we may have a limited window to take all these actions we want to take and to build momentum. And so basically, like, that's my last big point in question is like, how do we figure out what that high level strategy needs to be in order to then utilize the technologies that you're talking about to help people get connected to those solutions? And thanks for listening.
Yeah, I should have probably mentioned it. And this is just my idea. Obviously, this would be collectively, democratically decided by the real people doing the work. But my own idea would be this: a simple demand would be a passage of legislation that would provide probably a 20% wealth tax. How that would be divided between state and federal would be more complicated, but a really serious wealth tax that starts getting back to what the rich had to pay, even as recently as Nixon, the rich had to pay 68%. And of course, under Roosevelt, it was 95% of the marginal tax rate. But it would be a very concrete legislative goal like that.
Thank you,
Eh,
Gary, you have a very good point that it would be a coalition using the app. So there would be
Lots of input.
probably, yeah, lots of input, different ideas and good brainstorming to come up with some good solid demands. But I love your app. I think it's wonderful. I think it could be a great tool. Someone had a question in the chat. Oh
Great.
shoot, where'd it go?
So the next question I have is what kinds of goals will you put into that system for us to sign up for? Following up on what Justin was saying, and just for the record, Justin, I feel your pain. I am frustrated with the lack of specific goals in the movement. And a lot of it, the bottom line comes down to a lack of organizing and a lack of movement building. So those things we're not ready to decide because we don't have a specific enough leadership that everybody can say these are our goals. Yeah. And
That's
I think,
actually what I'm trying to hope to accomplish at a high level too. Like the same type of thing that Gary's talking about doing to get people into the movement. I want to try to like help build tools and pipelines to help like people who are trying to do strategic thinking. How do we figure out what we should be doing? You know, like I think we can do work on that too.
yeah, and that is harder to do scientifically. You know, what is your goal? The scientific way is a little hard. But I sent you a direct message, so if you want to email me, I'd appreciate it. Gary, did you want to respond?
Well, I'll just add that groups like the Patriotic Millionaires, and there's been an extensive interview with Erica Payne, the founder or co-founder on the Ralph Nader Radio Hour podcast, really lays out how that wealth tax could be easily instituted. Even in states, there's many states, by the way, like here in Pennsylvania, where the rich were so clever that they actually put into the Constitution that you could not raise the tax on the rich unless by whatever percent, unless you raise the tax on everybody else by the same amount. And that basically has prevented the rich from really being taxed. But what the patriotic millionaires have figured out is, well, we don't really the money all these rich bastards have is in their wealth. It's not in their income. In fact, they figure out how to pay themselves very little income, which is one of the ways they escape paying much in tax. But all the wealth is in their property and in their stocks. So we really should be going after wealth. There should be a wealth tax, and they've really done most, I think, of the homework necessary for this.
All right, Jenna.
Hi. I wanted to speak to Gary. I appreciated your presentation, and I think that the beginning portion, I can completely understand Greg's response, because it did come across intense and maybe judgy. But on the other hand, after getting past that, it really made me think about a recent interview with Obama on, I believe it was PBS, where he much more eloquently than I or anybody else said, we are at a point now in the US where all of us need to start personally questioning what we're willing to risk for the morals and the values that we see for this country. And Gary, you did the presentation?
Yeah.
That brought that back up to my mind and in focus, and to think, what am I willing to risk? And I think that that's an important question for each of us to really ask. And the process of signing up for something in the way that you did, where it's an action to go, okay, where am I willing to get involved? What risk am I willing to take? I think would be very effective to get out to people.
Yeah, I mean, basically where I'm coming from is that we think about courage. There's various kinds of courage, and there's the instinctive courage of the mother or father sees their child about to go out in the street and get hit by a car, and it just instinctively they go out and risk their life to grab their kid away from the car. That's just instinctive courage. But when we think about, for example, the fire person that runs into a burning building, we think they're really risking their life. They're so courageous, blah, 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 blah. But we forget the fact that they've been very thoroughly trained through simulated fires, through role playing, through every kind of scenario you can imagine, so that the actual risk that they may feel that they're taking is actually very, very minimal. In fact, the example I mentioned is, you've probably seen the video of the guy that free climbs Half Dome. You know, think, well, Jesus Christ, that guy's got more courage than anybody, than any 1,000 of us put together. But he's rehearsed every bit, just like a piano player knows exactly, where to put doesn't have to think about where they're going to put their fingers, over and over and over. So it's just exactly, so he's minimized the risk so carefully. And that's all I'm trying to say is basically, let's forget about using the word courage. What do people need to be able to do X, Y, and Z? How can we make it easy for them to choose the right thing? And we may call what they do courageous, but actually, the campaign has been smart enough to be able to figure out what people need to be able to be willing to do X, Y, and Z. And they made the choice of what we might call moral courage, finally easy for people to do.
Does that answer your question, Jenna?
It does.
Okay.
And that's all that now is feasible. So now my main takeaway is, everybody used to say, well, this is not the Depression 1930s where people were willing to have a national general strike. But people still have it way too well off in America. It's just no way you're going to get that kind of thing happening in America today. Well, I think that's bullshit. I think you can get that thing happening in America today because of what we know about behavioral economics, because of the kind of technology, the very simple technology I've just laid out. It's not new tech, it's not rocket science. It's just basically called a ladder of engagement that every website has anyway. But this is just a little bit more sophisticated. And it just basically, it's called choice architecture in behavioral economics terms. And it's just a very simple choice architecture that removes almost all the barriers people have that stop them from willing to do nonviolent direct action.
All right, so I have three more questions, but Justin had his hand up.
Yeah, I'm just about to have to go for other reasons, but I just wanted to say again how deeply grateful I am. And also, as relates to the last thing, yeah, it's like courage is one way to put it. But I think also like having the next step. There's this concept called in UX design or like engineering called affordances, which is like you see an object like a cup with a handle, and like the handle is an affordance. Like, oh, this calls to me to grab it and pick it up and bring it and drink, you know? And I think that these problems are just so huge that nothing in particular calls out to be done about it. Like it's like, you know. So having there be an obvious thing to do is one of the things. And the other thing in terms of like a motivating force is like part of our work is kind of telling the story of how much we all stand to lose by doing nothing. Because things kind of can look normal for a long time on the outside until there's like a famous quote of somebody in Germany like looking around and realizing that hearing his kids talk about like the dirty Jew, and he's like, oh my God, like what world am I in? Like when did this happen? You know? And so that's part of our job as organizers, I think. Anyway,
Justin, I hope you will email me, and you got my email from the chat.
I did take a screenshot, but like one thing I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna post the document in this chat. This is a document that I've been working on for a group that it doesn't exist, right? Like I'm not a person who's joined groups. I'm too introverted and everything. But the idea is kind of I felt like dissatisfied with the professionalism, everything, and the accountability. And so I'm like, okay, I'll write a document that's for a group that I would want to join if it existed. And I guess it could be a real thing. And so I guess if anybody wants to check that out and contact me, if they think it's something they'd be interested in as well, I definitely like to talk with more with you, Gary. I've also contacted everybody else who's direct messaged me. But I do have to go right now. You guys are all really awesome, and I'm so grateful to see that there's community here about all these things. And I'll put my emails in the document itself, but I'll put it there if anybody wants to get in touch, and we'll figure out how to work together. Okay, thank
Thanks,
you. Bye.
Justin. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Again, I cherish criticism, and I really appreciate Greg's criticism. That really helped me a
For
lot.
sure.
So any other concerns, why you think this wouldn't work, please have at. I've done 4 startups, and the first thing I learned doing startups living in Silicon Valley was the first question you always want to ask is why could this fail?
Mhm. So I've got some questions based on that that I've come up with. The first one is you talk about evidence-based research for what you're doing, and that these things work. What is that research? Where did it come from, and who paid for it?
So it was the beta testing we did with Last Generation in Germany, which was Germany's biggest Keep It in the Ground campaign, which immediately doubled. We did A/B testing for about the first 2 or 3 weeks, and it was so successful that the leaders refused to do any more A/B testing and insisted that we just use my system, my ladder of engagement, because it immediately more than doubled their rates of people signing up willing to get arrested to do nonviolent direct action. Now, the conditional commitment was supposed to be part of the test, but I raised $48,000 because that was going to require some real coding. And the engineer I unfortunately chose turned out to be completely dishonest, or I never did find out whether he was a psychopath, dishonest, or just incompetent, but he never finished the job. So we never were able to test it with conditional commitment. But conditional commitment has been used probably since the 90s and early 2000s in many, many rent strikes in both London and in France, and has itself by alone has doubled rates of people willing to sign up, willing to do rent strikes. So that's why I've concluded if you put the two together, you should be able to get a quadrupling.
So that's a good answer. I like it.
Yeah.
I'm definitely interested in what you're doing and want to learn more about it. 2 more questions. You asked where might this fail from an organizer's point of view. I completely agree with you. Kind of make it easy for people to become involved and take away the barriers to becoming involved and making a commitment. To that extent, you know, for me, I want to have lawyers. I want to have bail money. I want to have strike fund. People are talking about transportation. I'd love to be able to drive people in from all over. I don't have that kind of money. How do I get the resources to provide those to overcome these barriers?
Well, from my experience, bail money is usually very easy to get because from wealthy people, because they know that if 100,000 people are going to need are going to be needed for a nonviolent direct action, and 20,000 of those people are going to need $50 a bail, that's $10 million. You can get pretty wealthy people to come up with the 10 million because they know it's bail money, which means they're going to get almost all of it back anyway. That's in terms of bail money. In terms of transportation, that would be a combination of ordinary people chipping in to help people who can't afford to go by train alone. The money coming from ordinary people with a combination of being matched by more well-to-do people.
Okay.
I
Oh, and then
know,
in terms of
Gary.
housing, well, if it was a longer term thing, in terms of housing, this project that I was trying to get off the ground called Adopt an Organizer, it's kind of like GoFundMe meets mutual aid. That would basically be drawing on people that want to help, and they would be willing to provide free housing in their living room, like a couch with a private screen. And it would obviously have to be same gender, and there'd have to be a reputation management and references and all of that. But for longer term resistance, I think that's quite feasible to do now.
Okay, and then the last question I have is people brought up in the chat, and I think very rightly so, that in the 60s, getting arrested had far fewer implications. But with the administration that we currently have, where a lot of people's basic civil rights are already being violated and criminal activity is not being stopped, there's nothing to stop them from making the consequences of getting arrested much higher. I mean, they're talking about deporting citizens, they're sending people to Guantanamo, they're sending people to Venezuela, even just something as simple as, you know, terminating federal workers and putting pressure on institutions to fire people who believe differently than the administration. How do you address that it's not as small a deal to get arrested now as it may have been in the past, because you don't know what this administration is going to do?
Well, I've got about 3 answers to that. The first is anticipatory obedience is one of the quickest ways to actually get a dictatorship, is to anticipate and decide to obey, which I think all of you who are familiar with Timothy Snyder's work know that's a real definitely the wrong way to go. Number 2 is that yes, with this administration, there's definitely risks getting arrested if you're undocumented, or your parents are undocumented or anything like that. But for the 95% of Americans that don't fall into that, I don't see there's any greater risk right now than there ever has been. And the third thing is that when you get large numbers of people risking arrest, we're talking about thousands. They don't have any place to put you. It's way beyond their jail capacity for Washington, D.C. or New York City, or even the biggest cities. Once you get 100,000 people, it's way beyond what they can put in jail anyway. So, and then you have so much clout. The lawyers have so much clout that I've never heard yet of anybody really getting convicted when you have gigantic numbers like that. It's just too much for their legal system. So the lawyers are basically saying, do you want to have a trial for each one of these 100,000 and completely screw up your judicial system to really be able to address real criminals? And the judicial system said, no, we don't. So, well, then drop all the charges, and we'll agree to sign a thing saying we're not going to be back at the pipeline for 6 months or whatever whatever they can negotiate. But if you get large numbers, you're not going to have a conviction in the first place.
That's a good point. I guess if nobody else has a question, my final question is, as an organizer, what would be the next steps? What should we do?
Well, all I'm asking for people who are interested to know more, who see that, who agree that we really do need a national civic uprising. It's long overdue. Anything less is just, we could have protests up the yin yang, large protests. I mean, the national mobilization moratorium to stop the war in Vietnam had 500,000 people, twice what King got in Washington, D.C., and it did not stop the war. I mean, I'm not putting down protests. Protests are good to be able to recruit people to do, quote, more courageous things, like what we're talking about, to enlarge your membership. And by the way, I've gone to several protests and I've gone around with clipboards asking people, do you feel you need to do more? You want to do more than just go to protests? And I was able to get 25 people an hour signing up saying, yes, send me what more I could do than just have protests. So I think we're very ripe now for doing much more than just having protests. But I think these next steps should not be laid out by me. I think we should have some brainstorming. I know some good techniques for brainstorming beyond just the usual, where we get the highest quality and the most quantity of ideas, and take it from there. I don't pretend to have all the answers at all.
Pat, you
Okay.
had a question?
Yes, I do. Well, actually not a
Oh,
question.
no, I'm sorry, Jeanette.
Oh.
Pat was first.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I guess I'm not quite understanding the effect of being arrested, how that is making it more valid. I don't understand that,
Yeah, you're right.
As far as everything that's going on, it's like people have said, oh, it's hard to keep up with what you're going to protest too. I mean, this week it's Harvard and the family they let out down in, he pardoned down in jail for $30 million tax evasion, and it's just on and on and on. The amount of treason this man's committing is horrifying. And so I guess, yeah, go ahead about the arrest part. That'll be great. But I just want to bring that up too. Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at tool chests like beautifultrouble.org, or this, to me, my favorite book on this is called The Path of Most Resistance, which is written by Ivan Marovic, who's one of my mentors and advisors. He was the co-founder of Otpor, which is still considered to be the best designed nonviolent resistance movement in the last 35 years. It's the one that overthrew Milosevic in 99, 2000. You discover you have to do what's called an analysis of power to discover which are the particular pillars of power that are supporting the regime. And you have to do a spectrum of support to find out who are going to be your most likely strongest supporters and who are going to be the next most likely to start developing your coalition. But the point is not to do nonviolent resistance for its own sake. The point is to be able to shut down a major institution, whether that be Wall Street, the Houston refinery, the Congress itself, or just the major business section of any major city, to shut down major institutions long enough that people say, we've got to we better give in, we better negotiate, because this is really hurting business, or hurting what the ruling class needs to continue.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thanks.
Or shutting down a port, for example, like the ports that are shipping arms to IDF.
Yeah. Great, that helps. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Jeanette.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Gary. This was very helpful. And as I was listening, because I've been arrested before, and I've been asking, as you have, in marches and other places, I've been talking to a lot of different people and asking what would help us coalesce. And so I've been asking myself tonight as you were talking, what is my hesitancy personally right now?
Kids to shut up.
Because I don't.
Whoever's speaking, you need to be quiet.
Go
Okay,
ahead, Jeanette.
I'm
Okay.
sorry about that.
that's okay. I figured somebody wasn't muted. So here were the three things that I came up with. I tried to ask myself, Gary, because I thought that would help me kind of get at where I am at least. And there were three things. I don't know, I cannot figure out, as somebody in sociology, a coalescing message. I hear tax the rich, and I also know people who would say behind that, and then what are you going to do with that? And when I talk to people, even something that I think is as basic as maybe saving, and I would add transforming democracy, isn't making it. It's not making it on the list for people, because especially with a generational divide, which I keep running into, what people really want to happen right now is different. And so that's my first question for me. Let me do my second 2 points, which would be, when I was arrested before, I was working with people I deeply trusted already. They were church people, spiritual people, communities of different denominations that have worked together, activist groups that had worked together. That was already there. And I don't know if you've thought much about that idea of a lot of the people I'm meeting online and in the streets, I've never met before. So when somebody says to me, well, let's go to jail together. Well, I did that with people I really knew and believed in. So it feels different in this moment. And I don't know how much you've thought about that. And the third thing would be for me, truthfully, believable leadership. And that is, I mean, it's not a popular term right now. Max Weber doesn't seem to be making a comeback in terms of charismatic leaders. But for me as a sociologist, I hear more and more people saying, well, we're a leaderless movement, so everybody's leading. And I think, okay, getting arrested for everyone leading? No. I need believable leaders, and it doesn't have to be all top down and they have a lot of money and power. But I need to know who I'm going to bat with and who I'm going to the mat with and for. And I think it's important, and Morgan has heard me say this before, I really am happy to hear him and other people from 5051 and other places starting to talk to each other and say, look, if we're really going to get to this 12 million doing anything, we've got to talk. We got to see if we have some trust, some commonality, a real vision together. So that's kind of the three things that for me, I realized personally, it's not like I even won't get arrested. It's like, what would hold me back right now? And those are the three big ones.
Yeah, that's very, very helpful. Yeah, I didn't talk about it, but creating solidarity, a small affinity groups of 3, 4, 5, 6 people within your city or within your neighborhood. This is really, really critical for any campaign to work. And I do mention that in that 9-minute video about writing down your particular interests, and then the campaign getting you together with other people who share those hobbies, that kind of thing. There's lots of ways it can be done, but it's very, very critical to create solidarity for a movement to really succeed. By the way, speaking of 5051, I forgot to mention, I'm really looking to be connected with high ups there. So if anybody on this can connect me, please email me, because I'm just a nobody also, and I would they're not going to open up my email unless I'm introduced by somebody they know.
I just wanted to chime in, responding to Pat and Jeanette. I've said this before, we are running into a problem where, if you want to talk about people that you trust, and you want to talk about established goals, and you want to talk about how are we going to do this, it all requires organization and planning and movement structure that simply didn't exist before we started. We've come a long way, but there's still a lot to go, and there's still a lot of holes in it before we get to where we need to be, which, the answer to that is be patient. We're going to do the work. at the same time, like Pat was saying, there is so much coming down the pipe. There's so much that needs to be responded to in a quick, timely fashion. It's hard to hear it's going to take some time and have that be a satisfactory answer. So trying to do those both at the same time is unsurprisingly proving to be difficult. But that's still what we're doing. You talk about goals and what does a protest do? Yeah, a protest by itself doesn't do anything, and without goals, a movement is going to sputter and fall apart. If the goals are to hold the treasonous people accountable, well, the Constitution says the way to do that is impeach the president and bring everybody else up on charges for treason. Well, we all know that in this reality, that's not going to happen. He's got the immunity. He's got the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court that aren't going to hold him accountable, in which case the movement and the protests and the resistance needs to be far more direct about how he gets removed from power and how these people are held responsible. But that all complicates things for people who may not be on board with that. This is the nitty gritty and what it looks like to be inside the movement and the issues that you're going to have to deal with. So with that being said, I'll let Kathy go. Go ahead, Kathy, ask your question.
This Kathy?
That Kathy.
Okay. Far too common a name. Well, one of the things when you were talking about groups starting to come together, I'm here in Springfield, Illinois, and just within and I spent up till I think March trying to find any local anythings. I've been involved with a lot of groups like here, Long Island, but with Indivisible, but just within the last month and a half, we've had Indivisible groups spring up in Jacksonville, who's working with a group that sprung up here in Springfield that's working. And all of a sudden they're working now with 5051. So it's happening. It's just, there was like a point where it just had to kind of hit I guess, I don't know what you would call it, a break point or something, where all of a sudden people are like, oh, we really do need to start really doing something. So I think we have the starting point. It's just trying now to figure out, okay, how best to make use of it, because groups are starting to come together. And they're starting to spring up very quickly, particularly around the state of Illinois.
Happening in Colorado too. We use the Activism Alliance Slack that I'm always posting the link for. That's where quite a few groups got together to plan the huge hands-off protest on April 5th. We only had 12 days to plan it, and most of us had never met each other before. But we worked together as a group and it went really well.
I will let B go ahead, and then I will say something about what I'm seeing. Go ahead, B.
It's Broxy. I probably should put that on there when I sign up.
That's
Hey,
all right.
well, first I have a couple things I want to say, but it really struck me. I don't know if anybody ever saw the Facebook post about Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift and how Trump attacked them, but he stood his ground. And I really think we need a much bigger, more powerful movement. And by bringing in celebrities like Bruce Springsteen, who is not one to back down from how he feels, how possible is it that we can get some of these celebrities to be at one of the protests, like Jamie Raskin back east? He pulls in a lot of people, or Jamie Crockett. She would be great to pull in, or Governor Polis, or Bennett or Hickenlooper. How can we get some big hitters to be with us in our resistance to that is going to make those changes that we want to see? Because right now I don't see that happening very quickly or very soon, and it's petrifying.
Can I quickly answer that?
Go ahead.
And I wanted to tell you too, Gary, thank you so much for bringing up how to bring more power to the people, is what I got out of your
Thank you.
speak.
Because I used to make a lot of anti-nuke films, I always had to get a celebrity to narrate it, like Paul Newman and Richard Dreyfuss, Martin Sheen, who's become a good friend of mine. It's actually not that hard. I mean, I'm surprised you didn't mention George Clooney, but
Well,
all you have to do is you contact the Screen Actors Guild, because all these people have agents. The agents won't want to bother wasting their time talking to you because you're not going to make them money. So you're going to ask them for the publicist, and they're going to quickly hand you off to the publicist, give you the email and phone number for the publicist, and then you write the publicist a very short one-page letter explaining why you really want them to come and what a huge difference it would make, and the leverage by coming to your event, why they could affect all of Colorado, something that really sells them on why they could do it, how you'll cover their hotel, all that sort of thing. Don't mention offering to pay air, because they're so wealthy, they'll probably pay it themselves. And it's not that hard. Also, you should find out what celebrities might have actually been born and raised, if not in your city, at least in Colorado.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be disrespectful or nothing, but iPad 279. Excuse me? The ma'am who's eating right now? Miss?
iPad 279.
Yeah, not to be disrespectful. Can she unmute herself?
I'm not sure what you, I would recommend you send her a direct message in the chat.
Okay, I did, but I don't mean to be, but her camera was on while she was using the bathroom.
Oh.
Okay, anyway, and anyways, you find out, for example, Martin Sheen was actually born, I believe, in Akron, Ohio. And so people in Akron, Ohio could have easily gotten him to come out during the Senate race there. And maybe they did, I don't know. But I'm sure there's some very famous celebrities that are born or maybe went to college at University of Colorado, or born and raised, and use that angle as well. But they just need to be asked, and if they're not busy shooting a film, that's mainly what you're going to be up against. If they're busy shooting a film, you're not going to be able to get them. But if they aren't, and also think about famous directors, like, I don't know why people haven't gotten Spielberg to do some things. Maybe he's torn regarding the Gaza situation, but I've always been wondering, since so many of his movies have been about courage, why he hasn't been used by the Jewish Voice for Peace to stop the genocide. Anyhow, it could go on and on, but they're directors, not just movie stars and not just singers.
Can you repeat the name again, who you said to contact?
The Screen Actors Guild, I think it's just sag.org.
And ask for the publicist, not
and
the...
you ask for the agent for whatever actor you're looking for, and then they'll give you that right away. And then when you contact the agent, then you'll want to ask the agent, how do I reach the publicist?
Okay.
And you may have to contact them 2 or 3 times. Perseverance is always the name of the game.
It is.
And that ties into what I was going to say from before. The first reason why nobody has done it is, I didn't even know that was the best way to contact somebody. Thank you, Gary. I will keep that in my brain now. But even if you do get somebody who agrees to do it for free, let's say Bruce Springsteen wants to show up and have a concert at Red Rocks for us, we need to get Red Rocks, or we need to get a venue that they can play at. And then, he said, we may not need to worry about the airfare, but we might. Or we might need to worry about hotels and food, or, basic things that even if they are coming for free, would require some logistics and some money. And those are really the two reasons that nobody has made that ask. And I'm sure it will be coming in the future. And, also going back to some of the comments in the chat as well, there's a lot of questions about the movement in general. What I am seeing is something that is popping up as very decentralized. There isn't a single central point that's saying these are our goals, these are our methods, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Whether it should exist or should have been built before or whatever, it doesn't, and there isn't. And because of the need to respond, there is a very decentralized movement with a lot of people who are taking it upon themselves to go and do things. A perfect example is here in Denver. We're having protests at the Capitol. We're having protests in other places in the city. We have people who are doing Tesla protests at Tesla dealerships, and people are doing things, they're hanging banners from street signs, and doing mutual aid, and a million people doing different things, because all of these things need to happen all at once. But at the same time, there is no, central authority that is giving information out. That is just the way I see things going. And from there, things are both coalescing, into more formal leadership at the same time that things are getting done. And I'm not sure that at any point in this movement, there is going to be a single centralized leadership that is going to say, this is the way things are going to go. More likely, you're going to see multiple groups in multiple places. One of the other things that you need to keep in mind about this is a lot of this started with the four groups: Mobilize, Indivisible, Working Families Party, and Public Citizen, getting together to start events and Zoom meetings like this that eventually fell apart because they got to a point that they couldn't get along, and then they worked it out and sort of came back, and it kind of is, and it's going to kind of be something different. And I promise you, there are going to be splinters in this organization, in this movement. Nothing is going to go perfectly smoothly. There's going to be steps backwards, steps forward, steps sideways. And, as of right now, I'm not going to see a single unified movement with clear goals. I'm going to see a bunch of people responding or proactively doing something as issues come up. As the big thing about our protests is every time there's a theme and we have speakers related to that theme, and every time the theme changes, and that's going to change based on what people organizing them see as the biggest need for the most number of people. So, I've talked till I'm blue in the face about mutual aid. Well, we're talking about actually getting some of that moving for this meeting. But again, mutual aid by itself is something that a person in a group can focus on without worrying about any of the larger political things. And one of the things that we're sorting out is, how do you get a strong movement leadership, and how do you get the people who are coming from other groups and bringing and representing their groups and the movement the resources that they need to continue doing the work that the movement needs that they're doing. It's a little complicated and convoluted, and that is just the world that we live in right now as activists. And putting order to that chaos is one of the things that I like to do.
I also wanted to just put a plug in for, I know there's some people here that are sort of against AI, but I really think we should always try to use AI. For example, you could just ask AI, how do I reach a celebrity? And they would have told you, I'm sure, pretty much what I just told you. And you could even ask AI, could you give me a sample of the kind of letter I should send a publicist that might convince the publicist to get their celebrity to come to our event? So don't be bashful about using AI. I particularly
I
like
like AI. I do use it.
I
And
like both Claude because they seem to be the most moral of the bunch,
Love
but I
AI.
also like perplexity.ai quite a bit
oh,
because
okay.
they also give you URLs, and one of
Yeah,
my
Perplexity gives you.
anyway,
he went
so I just want to
silent.
put in a plug for that. And if any of you know Justin Pardo, tell him to send his document to me because I didn't see it in the chat and I want to get his email. And again, I'd love any help reaching people at 5051. If any of you can put me in contact with them, I'd be very grateful. Oh, and last thing, of the four vulnerable Republicans that won by less than 2,500 votes, one of them, as you know, is in your district, the 8th district in Colorado. And I have some money to hire former Trump angry, betrayed voters, people that probably were very active with MAGA, saw the light, and are now very angry and very disappointed, to actually hire a couple of these people in the 8th district, and there are two other counterparts to them in Pennsylvania. And their job would be to organize, the people I'd want to hire would be people that have natural organizing ability.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Hi, I believe that iPad. Sorry.
Anyway, if you know anybody in the 8th
iPad.
district,
Sorry.
excuse me, if you know anybody in the 8th district that would be interested in being hired, or want to just help me find those people, they should be pretty easy. The local press probably knows who they are. All these people have to do is organize 1,000 or 2,000 fellow angry former MAGA people, and that's probably going to be enough, I predict, to pressure that vulnerable Republican, the guy in the 8th district only won by less than 2,400 votes, to stand up to Trump, at least on these healthcare cuts and on saving democracy. And if we get two more, actually, to be exact, we can, on the 4th of July, celebrate the end of the dictatorship.
I will say that Gabe Evans has been running commercials showing how he is supporting Donald Trump, and I think it is going to end that.
It's going to end there, he said?
It